he took it from her, and which was unexpected. Let alone to win the presidency, which, you know, after the financial crash towards the end, it definitely solidified his great chances to 100% on winning the presidency. The interesting part is some think Akhenaten may have co-ruled with his wife Nefertiti because of how she's depicted on the hieroglyphs as doing things that only pharaohs had done. So with Obama, the correlation may be is he brought Hillary Clinton into his government, which is a co-ruling in power with him as Secretary of State, and it does put her in line for the presidency. But even beyond that, Nancy Pelosi is the Speaker of the House, which is another part of the U.S. government, and which also he technically co-rules with her as three separate but equal parts of the government. Akhenaten banned the use of images except for the sundial called the Aten. Obama, shortly after he was elected, cracked down on the use of his image on shirts and posters and whatnot, his creative license of his image, and that's an interesting point there. Now during the time of Akhenaten, Egypt suffered a massive plague. It was either bubonic or influenza, either being from bird, pig, or human, and apparently there was a lot of distress, which a lot of people think that that the gods had turned against him, which made him even more hated than what he was. Because I'm sure that the aristocracy really didn't like him too much, because the priests of the old priest especially, but the common person wouldn't necessarily have that much of an interest who was ruling the roost, what religious system they followed per se, but they were superstitious in the sense that when a major plague breaks out, then it's like, oh, this is a message of the gods, especially since this happens after the Exodus, and they went and they may have heard of what had happened in prior times of plague and associated with this pleasure of the gods or God, and so it didn't make Akhenaten the most popular person in Egypt at the time. And so his reforms only lasted, Akhenaten's reforms only lasted until shortly after his death. There was a few, Tutankhamun was one of the rulers after Akhenaten, which is a more famous pharaoh because they found his tomb. As a matter of fact, they wouldn't even have known of Akhenaten in their line if it wasn't for the finding of King Tut's tomb in the 1920s, because King Tut is supposed to be Akhenaten's son, or potentially his son. They don't know for certainty because they haven't found any documents or hieroglyphs that specifically state that, but they do know that Tutankhamun is a close relative to Akhenaten and to that family. So in some way or another, he's related to them. But what had happened is after Tutankhamun dies, they had, I think, two other pharaohs of the 18th dynasty, and then after the new dynasty took over, they erased Akhenaten from the king's list and basically erased him from history until they found King Tut's tomb, and then they were able to piece things together. Which makes you wonder, what does the future hold in that regard? Well, does that mean the United States or the world is going to suffer a major plague outbreak of bubonic or bird flu, or a type of flu with swine and human contact? That would be a potential parallel that might happen. Also, this idea that Akhenaten was removed from the king's list. Obama has a slight problem in the sense that some people don't believe he was a natural-born citizen of the United States, and his grandmother was on record as saying that she remembered Obama being born in Kenya. Well, that does not allow for Obama to be president. Of course, he's president now, but if at some point it comes before the Supreme Court, either before or after he's finished with his term, it'd be interesting to see what happens. I personally don't think that the Supreme Court or anybody really has the guts, even if it was true, to attempt to throw Obama out of office, but it's a possibility because we have this pattern here, and Akhenaten was erased from the king's list, and there are petitions by people who want it brought before the Supreme Court, as it should, because he has not released his birth certificate. He gave a short form, which doesn't really prove anything. Anybody born anywhere would have that short form. They have not released the original, and that's something that can come back to bite him. And of course, the problem there being that if they do go to Hawaii and get the original and find out that he was not born in the United States and decide to throw him out of office, that definitely would lead to a lot of civil unrest and strife, most definitely. Because if nothing else, I'm sure that certain groups in certain quarters, there would be riots, there would be problems. But in the end, it's nobody's fault but Obama's. I mean, he knows where he's born, where he's from, and he knows the rules. And if you don't play by the rules, whose fault is that? Of course, they probably won't try to blame him, they'll try to blame the system. Of course, in times of strife, we must turn to God and family. And with that, I hope you turn to the one who can stand with you closer than a brother, closer than any family member, and that would be Jesus Christ. Now, thank you for listening to today's episode. And if you guys have any questions or comments, stories, or show ideas, I can be reached at rev1301.com. That's rev1301.com. Again, that's where I can be reached. If you have any ideas or stories or anything you want to know about, any questions, gladly send it, and I'll answer it on another show, or I may answer direct if I have time. And thank you for listening, and may God bless you and keep you. Bye-bye.
The devil who deceived them was thrown into the lake of fire and sulfur where the beast and the false prophet are, and they will be tormented day and night forever and ever. I also saw the holy city, New Jerusalem, coming down out of heaven from God, prepared like a bride adorned for her husband. Then I heard a loud voice from the throne. Look, God's dwelling is with men, and he will live with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them, and be their God. He will wipe away every tear from their eyes. Death will exist no longer. Grief, crime, and pain will exist no longer, because the previous things have passed away.
The Revelation 13 podcast is hosted by Mike Poplar, and is a podcast dedicated to the study of end-time events, news events, and ancient mysteries.